Welcome to day 3 of the NCAN National Conference. We hope you've enjoyed the conference thus far, and we have an exceptional plenary session ahead for you. It is my distinct pleasure to welcome Mr. Montez Cooper to our virtual stage to introduce our plenary speaker today. Mr. Cooper is not only a rising senior at Coppin State University, he's an author and a motivational speaker, but really overall an exceptional role model for many young people. Finally, Montez is also a College Bound scholar. And a quick note about College Bound. The College Bound Foundation works exclusively in Baltimore City Public Schools to enable students to pursue a secondary education and improve the social and economic fabric of the community through an educated workforce. Since 1988, College Bound's nationally recognized college advising model has transformed the lives of tens of thousands of high school students nationwide. NCAN is proud to have College Bound Foundation as a member. Without further ado, please welcome Mr. Cooper to our virtual stage.
Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. It is a great pleasure for me to introduce our speaker today, and I'm excited to soak in knowledge like a sponge from what will be addressed today. Since 2018, I've grown a passion to help the youth by improving their mental health. However, our plenary speaker and CEO of Baltimore City Public Schools, Dr. Sonja Brookins Santelises, has spent close to 30 years focusing on building high-quality teaching and learning to students excel. She is now in her second term as Chief Executive Officer of Baltimore City Public Schools, to which she was first appointed on July 1st, 2016. Dr. Santelises has previously served Chief Academic Officer for city schools since 2010 through 2013. Prior to returning to Baltimore, she served for 3 years as Vice President for K12 and practiced at Education Trust, a national nonprofit organization focused on closing the achievement gap experienced disproportionately by students of color from low-income families. She holds a Master of Arts degree in Education Administration from Columbia University and a Doctor of Education and Administration, Planning and Social Policy from Harvard University. She has lived in Baltimore with her husband and 3 daughters since 2013. Oh yeah, last thing to mention, traveling is her hobby. Please welcome our plenary speaker who is here with us today, Dr. Sonja Brookins Santelises.
Thank you so much, Montez. Montez and I were talking probably last week, and one of the things I said to him is that I'm gonna have to record his introduction because it's one of the better ones I have ever had, and so I want to give a big shout out to Montez and say thank you for that. Today, I really have the privilege of sharing a bit of Baltimore City's story, how we really had to do some of the hard inward looking at our own work that we really began in earnest, I would say about now 4 years ago. A shout out some of our team, our college and career ready team, I know is part of the conference, both as presenters as well as participants. So a shout out to Dr. Rachel Pfeiffer, Tracy Kittle, I know is presenting, and I'm sure there are other members of our team. And so this story is not my story, but it's their story. And most importantly, it's students like Montez's story who are still with us. And what's really interesting is that in 2016, Stephanie DeLuca published some of her research, and it is in Coming of Age in the Other America. And Stephanie spent 10 years following actual Baltimore City students. And what she found was that when we, as a district, were pushing College for All, and as Montez referenced, I was Chief Academic Officer around this time, while we were pushing College for All, what she found was that the students who didn't want to attend college actually stopped speaking. to the school counselors and school-based adults about their future plans. So as a result, they weren't getting any career guidance at all. And so what we really needed to do is to take a hard look at changing our message. And so our new message is everyone needs a career, and there are many paths to get there. College is one of those paths. So the first step in creating really a campaign or any kind of initiative around career and college readiness for the real world that young people are living in is really to listen to them. And so one of the things that we did was we, created a campaign to listen. We took a long view of what our young people needed, and we were listening specifically for the things that matter, right? The things that matter to them. And so that's how we actually began unearthing some of the changes we had to make in how we were approaching it. We would communicate, they would react, but what we had to really do is to, before we were communicating, actually hear what it was they were listening for and what was most effective with them. The second piece was we as a district had to be transparent about the obstacles and the efficacy or lack of efficacy in what we were currently doing. It would have been very easy for me to say, look, as chief academic officer, coming back as CEO, of course, what we were doing was the right thing. And of course, what we were doing was what needed to be done for kids. But hubris in this line of work actually ends up doing harm to young people. And so one of the things that we had to do, and frankly, as the leader in the district, I had to model, was that being transparent about the obstacles, really looking truthfully at the efficacy of our current efforts, wasn't going to be pretty, but it was absolutely what we needed to do for young people. And sending that signal early from every corner of the organization is essential if we're really going to get at the heart of what is going to ensure that our young people really do have the access to the post-secondary careers and frankly livelihoods and lives that they want. So the bottom line on that is it may not look pretty, but we've got to take a look at it. And then the third major step for us in our campaign was graduation is important, absolutely, but the process doesn't end there. One of the things that we found is that the messages that our schools were receiving was that graduation was the end all to be all. Graduation from high school is absolutely important. High school graduation rates will always be an important measure of our work. But graduation is not the penultimate experience. We had to expand our view of how we define success beyond just graduation rates and persistence. What we needed to do is what we were hearing from employers in Baltimore City, that skills, motivation, opportunity to earn a living wage were all factoring in to how we needed young people to view the trajectory of their lives and the messages that we as adults were sending through the opportunities we were giving, what we were emphasizing in our language, as well as the kinds of supports. So when we took that deeper look, really it was class of 2009 data that we used really to inform our work. And there were some real kind of wake up data points that again, didn't look pretty, but we knew we had to look at. I also know that our colleagues here are going to enter in to the chat for everybody to be able to see some of the graphics that I think are really powerful in showing what we found when we presented some of this data based on our deeper research, not just the surface graduation rates, not just even the persistence rates, but when we really got down to what's the quality of life and the ability of our young people who are graduating from city schools to make a life for themselves and a family. Again, the results were not pretty, they were sobering, but they were exactly what we needed to be able to motivate the systems change that we've been working on the last 3 to 4 years. So a couple of highlights of those, again, if you look at the link to the Baltimore's Promise website. If you are more into the visual representation, which I think we all are at some point, Baltimore's Promise has done wonderful work in helping us to capture some of the most essential data points so that the whole community could be aware of what we were up against and what we needed to rectify. So a couple of things that we found when we took that deeper look is that the high school class of 2009 that had 4,200 graduates, we had 26% of that class did not enroll in college and did not enroll or participate in the Maryland workforce. So that's over a quarter of Baltimore City Public School high school graduates who were in this netherworld of not being in college, not being in career. And we all know that being in that netherworld is a real dangerous and unproductive and frankly hopeless place to be. If you can't be part of the workforce and if you can't be part of higher ed, then what we find is that that part of the population is actually driving some of the other challenges in our community. The other piece, when we look at that group of students, when we look at that opportunity youth, those youth that are betwixt and between in that netherworld, what we found is their median earnings by 2017 were only around $11,000 per year. So only 10% of 2009 city schools graduate earned a 4-year degree. So when we were looking at the economic well-being of our city, when we were looking at some of the challenges of our city, I do think that that kind of information we were willing to, by the way, show this in public board meetings was incredibly sobering. $11,000 a year does not even, it doesn't even add up to minimum wage, like substantial minimum wage work. So when we're talking $11,000 a year, how can you then look at your K12 system and consider it, right? The kind of vibrant or healthy component to building a strong Baltimore. After 6 years, one of the things that we found was that 60% of our students had enrolled in college but did not graduate. And only 16%, which is frightening if you think about it. This is even with some college, only 16% earned a living wage. 29% had never enrolled in college, 10% had earned a bachelor's degree, and 1% had earned an associate's degree. So there were large gaps in these areas, and there were also gaps within subgroups. So we saw degree completion between African American Black graduates and white graduates. There were large gaps. Only 8% of African American men who graduate from city schools at that time had obtained a degree after 6 years, compared to 26% of non-African American male graduates. Now, frankly, we should not be happy with even the 26%, but within that to say 8% of Black men in Baltimore City graduating from city schools had obtained a degree even after 6 years. So one of the things that really signaled to us is, again, hard news. It's not pretty, but something that we had to be able to communicate broadly to the larger community. The other piece that really, I think, gripped a lot of not just city schools, but parents and students themselves was that the proportion of city schools graduates who were earning a living wage was low for all groups. So college graduates, even college graduates, at that time were earning a median annual income around $19,000, approximately $19,300. That was for college graduates. Again, all of those signals pointed to, we needed to change how we were doing this work. We needed to change how we were looking at the goals, again, beyond just completing high school. So one of the things that we talk a lot about is, and that we've spent a lot of time, particularly over the last couple of years, focusing on, is infrastructure. And the theme that our team uses is more is more. And what more is more means is that one adult in the building looking and guiding a young person through, or assigned to help advise a young person, meaning the what I call the formula that we used to use was like, kind of one high school counselor is now supposed to help navigate, help every young person in that building navigate, is not sufficient, particularly when we are talking about the fact that we have large percentages of our students who would be first generation college goers, large percentages of our students who do not know how to navigate the world of work. So what we mean when we see more, when we say more is we were building back our infrastructure to have more well-trained adults in schools to help students with their post-secondary success. It's not a zero-sum game. We want the adults, not just to have more adults in the building, but more adults focused on the same goal and focused on students. So some of the key investments that we've made in this area over the past few years include things like 8th grade algebra. We just knew, even for some of the more higher paying career pathways that young people wanted to be a part of, and technology required not necessarily an advanced degree, not necessarily a master's degree. It really required mastery of higher level math to a particular level. So one of the things we did was we went back and we've invested foundation dollars, ESSER dollars, in expanding access to 8th grade algebra. We also have dipped down into the middle school. And part of what we've developed, and the pandemic, frankly, and virtual learning has just brought this to priority and bubbled surface, is that within our middle schoolers, we've now made a commitment that every 6th grader in city schools will get to visit a college. Every 7th grader gets to visit a CTE class at a high school, and every 8th grader gets a job shadowing opportunity. Because one of the things we heard from our young people, is we're not starting early enough to show young people what that path looks like. The other piece where we have seen great success and early success, so much so that the Gates Foundation has helped to invest so that we can accelerate this process, is a real focus on 9th grade on track to graduate, which is heavy in counseling, heavy in pathway planning, heavy in adult kind of community members coming around young people to say, this is what it means to chart and plan a path. We've increased our 9th grade promotion rate in just about 2 years, from 67% of 9th graders being promoted to 10th grade to now 75%. We need to take that for this year, but we've literally had increased numbers every single year. What young people are telling us is they are getting information earlier and clearer than they ever have before, to the point where even though we started this in 9th grade, we've had a number of sophomores and juniors say to us, hey, we didn't get that when we were in 9th grade. We need that now, even though we didn't get it when we came. We have committed and really frankly hit our target early of at least one AP class in every high school, and equity coaching to support recruitment and retention. I was visiting one of our high schools, ACE, the Academy for College and Career Excellence, yesterday, and they have 2 full sections of AP classes that I had the chance to visit. They now have 4 courses where 3 years ago they had none. Those courses are full, and it's full because they changed their approach. It's not about screening kids out. It's about giving kids the option, the information, and supporting them when they're there. We've also had additional training for school counselors, consistency. This is what our young people have said to us. When you just come in with one initiative and it's gone in a year, that's not what reaches them. It's the consistency. So our consistent work with our FOFSA initiative, including Signalvine for texting students through the year. That's something that we've gotten great feedback from young people on. And then what it's meant is that we've got to pilot a lot of our workforce training programs, shorter term ways to get certification in high school, not just as second post-secondary options. We've increased our dual enrollment through support from Hewlett. We're using our ESSER dollars for this. We're using our ESSER dollars to expand some of our workforce training programs. And then the final piece, and I'll switch so we can get to some of the questions, that I think is important for people to know is we've really looked at expanding some of the time options and exposure options for young people. So increasing dual enrollment, additional summer school options for seniors. This year, our college and career ready team was just committed to making sure no young person was lost from a summer learning opportunity, particularly post the pandemic year. And we found that the second summer session that we ran, the first time we ran CTE summer options, really did yield tangible results. We had a 75% increase in the number of seniors graduating. We doubled our participation in summer school from 9,000 to close to just over 17,000. What we're learning from that is that when we give, and Dr. Mazik is clear about this, when we give young people the opportunities, we support them in knowing what those opportunities are. They show us every time that they are up to the task, but we've got to be consistent. We can't just do a one hit in and out, but once they learn, they tell their friends. So we have a navigator center that supports recent graduates who are part of those opportunity students that are kind of caught in that netherworld I talked about. And we tell them it's not too late. You can still connect. Our grad to career program, recent graduates to say it's not too late. You can still connect to a workforce training program. So I will end with saying that what we have found is that more is more opportunity, more consistency, more collaboration across offices. So it's not just college and career ready's work, it's the high school's work. It's also our community's work when it comes to mentoring and job shadowing. And what we found is that if we are going to make sure that all young people have robust options, we have to come at it earlier and with opportunities that are flexible and more catered to some of the variety of needs. The one pathway for all does not fit our young people. We saw what happened when we did that. And so we've spent far more time on more caring adults to help kind of as a journeyman. That's one of the things I say, you know, like if you look at Star Wars, right, we need more Yodas. We need more adults along the way who have the information and the knowledge to guide our young people through making sure that they have what it takes to plan the future that they want. So with that, I will end. I again want to just refer you to the Baltimore's Promise website. They have a lot of this same data, a lot of this same information that again has really helped us in getting the word out to public officials and community members as well. So with that, I'm going to give it back to Montaz, who I think is we're going to take some of the questions that some of you are putting in the chat.
Hey, Dr. Santelises, listen, I enjoyed your powerful message. It was so uplifting. I feel so inspired. And I also love the idea of creating a campaign to listen to the youth. And that's one thing that a lot of youth don't feel that they need to feel so that they can become more vulnerable to open up about their situations. Why would I explain to you how I feel if I feel like you don't understand me? Amazing job. So it's a lot of Q&A. It's a lot of questions. I want to start off with the first question. And the first question is, how do you track post-high school outcomes for your students?
No, that is a great question, and that has actually changed for us, Montaz, and I referenced some of that in the chat. So we still very much, of course, have to look at graduation and persistence. So we still look at the the 6-year college graduation rate. But what we are also doing, and I want to give a shout out to Kamasi Vines, who heads up our career shop as well. One of the things that we are doing is one, looking at our certification data very differently for our career students, right? So it used to just be, if you got a certificate, any kind of certificate, we counted it, right? And that's frankly how the state was doing it. What we have said is not every certificate is equal. Not every certificate means that you can go tomorrow and you have the qualifications for a job, or you can go tomorrow and go to one of our community colleges and do an advanced kind of certification. So what we are in the process of doing now is really sifting through that so that we can actually track what I call, this is not the official term, our CCR team can tell you the official term, but tracking what I call like living wage certification, meaning job ready certification. And so we now track that in ways that we did not before. The other piece really is this question around the skills. And we're developing, we're not at that place yet, and I will say that, but we're developing kind of a regular kind of survey of employers, because they were some of the folks who were giving us the feedback and saying, your kids aren't ready, right? Like, people are coming and they think they're ready for a career, but they're not. So we take that kind of data seriously as well. It's not the same as kind of like AP data, which we also track, but it is data that gives us career information that's a little more robust than what might just be kind of the surface. So those are some of the things that we track. We track at the middle school level as well as the high school level. For those post-high school outcomes. And we are going to go back and look at the wage data. That's clearly going to take a little longer, but that wage data is where the money, for lack of a better term, it's where the money hits the road. Like if our graduates are leaving and they are still only making $11,000, there's something we're not doing. That's on us. We have got to be able to get young people to the place where they are prepared to earn a living wage. And where nobody is fooling anybody that $11,000 or even $15,000 a year is a living wage. So we're also going to be looking at the wage data.
Amazing answer. And just before I move on, I was just thinking about my internship with Ally Bank. And like what I learned about that was financial literacy is very important. Like if you don't know about financial literacy, if you don't know the difference between, if you don't know how to manage your money, then you will always be a slave to money for the rest of your life. And just to teach the youth about knowledge, knowledge is power. That is amazing, Dr. Santelises. I want to move on to the second question. The second question says, how do you navigate those crucial change conversations where data might be a tough truth to digest?
No, that's a great question, and one I have to ask myself on a regular basis. I think some of it, what I found is, as hard as it is, it's just better to have the truth telling. And I have found that most people actually appreciate someone naming what people were sensing and feeling anyway. And I also think one of the things I was very fortunate is I had a team of folks who were ready to say, and we're going to come back with you with the answers, right? To just say that there's an issue and sorry, we can't really do anything about it, I think leaves people, would leave us exposed, right? And more than being exposed, it's, then why are people paying us if I can't, sorry, that's me. I can't take that. Sorry, I didn't realize it was going to come on my computer. So one of the things that I think also feeds into that is being able to give the data in real kind of hard-hitting ways, We did not come back right away and say, these are our solutions. We did not do that. We actually told people we're going to take the time to study this, not forever, but we promised kind of an end date of when the study would be complete, when we would be back, and we partnered with others to help get our message out. So those are some recommendations. Is kind of get your allies, the people you're going to partner with, and be ready and willing to come back with solutions and to develop those solutions with the key stakeholders. So the business community, the students themselves. Like I said, a lot of this reflects what young people told us. Like, we're not seeing the workplace, right? You want us to go out and get jobs, and just like what Montaz just said, if I don't see what happens in a bank, why would I be comfortable in that setting? So it is hard. You got to dig in, but I would just share those as things I think we did along the way.
You definitely, you gotta become uncomfortable in order for you to become comfortable, so that you can understand that it's more than what you see right now. A lot of us, we believe that our reality is for the rest of our lives, but we have people around us that can educate us and tell us that, hey, look, listen, it's more than what you can see right now. Look at the bigger picture. Look at this role model right here that can guide you in the right direction. I'm just feeling so inspired from your responses, Dr. Santelises. Like, it is amazing to be, the introducing you, and also like just to be the narrator, basically. I really appreciate this opportunity. Here's question 3. Do you tailor your solutions to the needs of each unique population?
That's a great question. And I would say that it's a combination of both. So I know, the example was like Black men. Some of the solutions are, and that's where, and I'll, touch on some of the questions about partners. That's where partners are really helpful. So with Baltimore's Promise, and I'm not just promoting them today, but they are a partner with us in the work. With them, we are targeting specifically young women between the ages of 18 to 22, 23, because that's a population we don't have kind of right in front of us, but we know are part of that group that we didn't serve well. And they're out there, and it's driving outcomes for our city. And so that's where partners become particularly helpful. So some interventions like that absolutely are that, right? And so, like, for mentoring, we do take into account if we've got a lot of young Black men who are interested in a particular area, we try to make sure that we have mentoring that reflects the demographics, right? It's not that it's an only, but it is, how do we make sure young people see themselves in it? But on the other hand, there are some interventions that are across the board, because we know that across the board, there are things every young person should have access to. And then I go back to kind of the examples of our 6th, 7th, 8th grade milestones. When I was chief academic officer and it was needed for the time where we were, there was a lot of decentralization, which was great because it gave schools that were ready to innovate the room to do that. That was wonderful. What we found was the unintentional negative consequence of that was that if you were in a school where there wasn't that innovation, you got left out. And so now we're at a place where we're saying there are some things that every young person deserves, whether they're in a subgroup, a particular school, a particular section of the city. So what we try to do is establish a foundational point. So like that 9th grade on track, that's for every 9th grader. So even if you are a high performing 9th grader, people assume you're not going to have any issues getting to graduation. It doesn't matter. We've said all young people should have that kind of assistance. So it's really a combination of both. Some things that are tailored because we know there's greater need and greater support needed. And then there are some things that we've just said, this is an equity issue for us, and every young person in Baltimore City should have it. So it's a combination of both.
Amazing. Question 4. What is your approach to collaborating for change?
That's a great question. And I think that evolves, but part of the way that it evolves is continuing to listen. So I would say, even when we think we have it, right? So for all the work we did, and when I say we, it was really Dr. Pfeiffer's team, for all the lift that like Danny Heller and Tracy Kittle and everybody else did to lift this work, we didn't stop at that initial study. So when we look, for example, at our career pathways, when Kumasi Vines came on board as head of our CTE and our career work, one of the things that Kumasi did was he surveyed employers, and that's not a one-time thing. So my key takeaway on this is we've got to keep listening. We dip back and look, I'm a leader. I have to make hard decisions. And what I tell people is, it doesn't mean because I hear you, I'm going to do everything the way you want me to do it. But I want you to know that you have the space to come and let me know what's working, what's not working. It was why I spent the summer, talking to folks in the community who were close to young people. But it's also why we've got to talk to employers, because we can say we want young people to have a higher wage, but we need to hear from them. So I have found that being clear about, and transparent, like, what are the decisions I've already made? There's no need to say to people, oh, give me your feedback if I've already made the decision. But at the same time, I have to be willing to suspend some decisions because the community buys in. I mean, I will tell you, like, again, and we saw the mistake in that. I was like, everybody's got to go to college person. And part of what turned me was looking and listening to young people and to realize they needed that validation in the same way that the data bore that out. And the other piece I would say, in addition to listening, in addition to being straightforward about which decisions you want input on and which decisions you've either already made or somebody else has made, the third piece is a willingness to change. Like, if this is about being dug in on, this is what I believe, and I won't move from it, you've got to be, there are, of course, some things that we fundamentally believe. I fundamentally believe, like, all young people should feel competent and, fluent in mathematical reasoning. But that doesn't mean they're all going to show it the same way. That doesn't mean everybody has to be an engineer. To be a carpenter, you've got to be fluent in a certain level of mathematics. And so we've got to be willing to change based on what our community is telling us, what our young people are telling us, and what bears out in the data. So that willingness to say, on this one, I might need to adjust, I think is how we've got to be able to work authentically with community partners.
I love that response. It's like you have to help students outline the things that they were taught in order for them to learn a different way so that they can see the bigger picture. Question 5, who was most important to get on board with your vision beyond high school graduation?
So I think it was a combination of people. It really was important to get everybody on board. I mean, at some point you got to get teachers on board, because they're the ones who are out front with young people all the time. No matter what I say or decree, I can't be in every single classroom. So you've got to get the buy-in from school leaders, from teachers. The other thing is you've got to get buy-in from the community. That was fortunately easier for us because Baltimore is a very entrepreneurial city. And so we had a lot of folks within the community, the business sector, that were willing to get on board with us with this because they were seeing it as well, right? They were seeing, like, we just need prepared folks to be able to enter some of these positions. And so they were able to get on board too. So I'd say those were the most important initially. But that's where we started. But I could imagine it might be a little different depending on your context.
So we're running close on time. I have one more question for you. How do you partner with community-based organizations and employers in this network, in this work?
This is something that we've gotten better at. And I give a shout out to our Family Community Engagement Office. And again, our CTE office headed up by Kamasi Vines under Dr. Pfeiffer. And one of the things that I will say on that is, having the infrastructure for folks to actually be able to weigh in. And, because I would go to speaking engagements and people would say, well, I want to be part of this program, or I have an internship for kids. Part of the challenge was we had no place to refer them to that could actually follow through. And I think we have, and there were some questions here about ESSER funds. We've devoted ESSER funds to being able to do that, but we've also made the long-term commitment that it's better for young people when we have folks who can actually operate on community requests and inquiries. Because the biggest kind of complaint I get from community members, like whether it's plumbers who want to give students internships there, or people in the tech industry who want our young people to work there, is they feel like, at times the system's unresponsive. So we have really worked to rectify that and to really make some movement, because when you're unresponsive, then the community's like, at least in Baltimore City, we have tons of people who want to help in this, but we're not navigating that well. And I think Kamasi and his team really have done a lot of work with that. And I would say the same thing, with Mavis Jackson, who heads up a lot of our college ready work. Like we partnered with institutions we had not partnered with before. So University of Baltimore, and making tighter connections to that sector, right? And making sure, Mavis headed up, we had our first kind of virtual university dual enrollment for incarcerated students, right? Which is usually a group that people traditionally think of as being left out of college and career discussions, because, well, those are young people that are incarcerated. And that's not what Mavis did. She actually focused in. We got a partner in University of Baltimore. So I think it's really looking broadly and making sure you have follow through, because nothing, at least in Baltimore City, nothing turns off community partners more than when you don't follow through, when you can't respond to their offers.
Wow.
It's not great.
Wow. That is amazing. Well, I believe that is it for the questions. It was a lot of wisdom that you said, Dr. Santelises.
And
With
you,
the questions
Montage,
I asked.
you were sprinkling some wisdom along there, taking little notes. Like, that's a good line.
Thank you so much. But I have a lot of notes from you as well. I just love the way that you think, and just building that genuine relationship, helping people connect with people who have the same passion. Like when I decided to turn my life around, one of my goals was to surround myself around like-minded people, and that's what you need in a school system. You don't need people who may have a theory or who may think different, or you need people who have the same mission, who can guide, who can lead, even when someone is feeling unmotivated or undoubtful. But I really appreciate everything, and I know that the crowd did as well. Thank you so much, Santelises, for your time. It was a pleasure. Thank you.
Thank you. It was a lovely moderation. You did a great job, Montas. Thanks for
I really appreciate it.